All right, let's get started. So I hope that the title also of this session had an effect that you might have thought about how does data governance and fun even fit together, right? And I think, I'm not blaming you, right? Because data governance, the word governance itself doesn't really cause the right annotations. I think the most fun associations that you might have. And although I agree, and I'm a big advocate to say that if you don't do data governance right, there are really serious consequences. But it doesn't mean that we cannot have fun while doing it, right? And it doesn't mean that we cannot use fun and more of the human side to actually address it and to get everybody to get on board and to actually drive data governance together. And this is what this session today is really about, right? So, how can we appeal more to the human side of data governance and the human needs and human interests to really drive data governance to success? And I'm sharing with you today a little bit of a definition of how data governance works, some, I would say, analogies about data governance that might help to understand it better, and lastly, some learnings about the human side of data governance and what can really help to drive it to more success by appealing to humanity. Before we start, let's quickly talk just about myself. So I'm Tiankai. I'm currently the data strategy and data governance lead at Thoughtworks Europe. I'm also very active in the data management community. So I'm the head of marketing at Dharma Germany. For those who don't know, Dharma is a nonprofit organization that focuses really on the community of data management professionals. I'm passionate about making music, Nintendo games, and silly humor. And as Adele already had indicated, right, I'm using my musical skills also sometimes to make the topic of data more approachable. For example, I've created two rap songs, one about digital analytics called the Digital Analytics Anthem, and another one called Governors of Data, really more of a rap anthem for data governance, which you will hear later at the end of this presentation. And on the right side, you have one of my quotes from one of my songs, right? So that is, if you just want numbers, the phone book has a website. I'm a proper analyst with actionable insights. And that is really one of the things where this represents the constant struggle, I would say, of data being more top of mind and being something that is driving business together rather than only being afterthought or a reporting function in many ways, right? So how to actually become more part of the decision making table and not just the let's see if it worked or not kind of process is really key here. And no matter in what data function you are in and what you're doing, having being informed earlier about what needs to be done and being able to influence decisions earlier is always helpful. And I think we all, as being interested in data or working in data, really want to strive in that way. So let's get started. And before we talk about the fun part, right, we can maybe talk about why data governance actually needs to be fun, right? So I would say that data governance itself needs a rebranding. And not only because the word itself, as I mentioned before, already causes some kind of negative connotations, but data governance existed for many decades already, and it was probably called information governance in the past. But it was in the very beginning, I think, a very authoritative and very controlling function that basically told everyone to not do certain things. But we live in this new age where this is not the key anymore. We know that using data and creating value with data is actually what gives companies a competitive edge. So the focus of data governance needs to be shifted, right? But we still have these misconceptions around data governance, such as data governance is the data police, or all data governance does is writing policies and then sitting back, or data governance just sits in the ivory tower and wait for others to comply, right? Or whenever data governance reaches out, they just want to stop things. And they are not completely wrong, again, compared to in the past and historically seen what data governance is doing. But we need to get out of this. So, whenever you talk about data governance, unfortunately, you will first have to deal with these misconceptions. So, breaking the ice and changing people's minds about governance needs some extra work. And this is also what today is about. And we live in this world now where data is all the hype, right? And that is really for better or worse. So, first of all, we have a higher speed and more complexity in business processes, right? The digitalization is not stopping, it's actually more accelerating. And there are new business models and changes of business processes happening that all create more pressure and requirements towards the data. Right. Over the last years, a lot of companies have invested into data literacy or fluency and also then making data more available basically democratizing them, right? Which means in companies, data is now more used, but it's increasingly more difficult to oversee what the data is being used for. So having that transparency on data use cases is becoming really a challenge. We also know about more regulations and them getting in place more and more and faster, right? Like there's the EU Data Act, the EU AI Act, there GDPR in the past, and all of these kind of things that will likely become more than less because we live in this new world where data is driving a lot of these things, right? And we all see a lot of risks in there. And lastly, of course, we have new technologies and industry trends. We cannot talk about data without talking about AI. But that, of course, is creating also new requirements and new pressure on what needs to happen to data. So the question is, how do we balance the quickly changing needs towards data with maximizing the value of data in a structured and scalable way enterprise-wide, right? And the answer really is data governance, because data governance is in that way that cross-functional function that tries to deal with all of these challenging aspects of it all, and to really then see how can we deal with it in the right way and what do we need to implement in an organization to save ourselves from the risks while still generating value as much as we can. So what is data governance, right? The objective really of data governance is that data governance wants to make data trustworthy by ensuring that data is created, processed, and used in a meaningful, secure, and valuable way. And this is a definition that I'm quite often using for two reasons. One is there is really a lot of definitions of data governance out there, and it's really tricky to navigate what is the right one, because in the end, it really depends on your industry and the maturity of how you manage data. And secondly, I always like to use this definition because it really makes clear the human side of data governance too, right? Because the word trustworthy itself has many human associations to it, right? First of all, it is by definition opinionated word, right? So I might feel something is trustworthy where others don't, right? And also along the data lifecycle and the action service data, you need to also agree on it together of what is trustworthy, and you need to act on it together to make sure that the data is trustworthy. So in the end, it comes down to human perception, human agreement, and human actions as well to make data governance a success. And if we compare data governance to the wider world of data analytics, right? I think it really is the continuum between critical thinking on human decision making, as well as data and basically having the right data to do so. So I always use the comparison to say in data analytics, we use data to improve human decision making. And in the data governance, we use human decision making to actually improve data. So in the end, this is all coming together, right? So with better data, we can make better decisions. And if we make better decisions, then we can improve the data again. So in the end, you have a really nice cycle where you have data as the source of better decisions while keeping the critical side of human thinking intact to really make better decisions based on the data. And I think it's really important to also differentiate that data governance is not only for avoiding risk, but there's also value drivers involved there as well, right? So basically looking at this, you have, I would say, the defensive side and the offensive side of data governance. The defensive way, and that we all know about, is regulatory risk, for example, or data privacy and security concerns, or protecting your brand reputation, for example, when it comes to sustainability related data and not wanting to greenwash yourself, for example. But if you do data governance right, you also have the value generating side, the so-called offensive side, right? Where you can actually becoming more trustworthy data means also making more fact-based decisions. You can in the end also through higher data quality probably increase revenue and also basically decrease costs, leading to a higher profitability. And you can also lead to a higher collaboration, because once data is now better to be used and can be actually leveraged, then people come together more and actually can use the data to drive decisions together and have maybe even innovation projects on top of it together as well. And in the end, the underlying foundation is data governance, right? And it really leads to growth through data, right? So you can increase operational efficiency, you can forecast better, for example, you can discover data and have more secure access to the right data, you can align business and IT functions better together, and you can also easier scale actually capacity and really use data and reuse data much more as well to drive value with it. And why I call that the foundational one is using this really nice just iceberg analogy, right? Where you have like a lot of things in the background that people might not see, but they are the ones that are actually a foundation that's needed to drive the more advanced capabilities, right? So if we think about just AI, machine learning, or like business intelligence things, the foundation of it is to have the right strategy, the right governance, the stewardship, the models, and the data integration, for example, in place to make it all even work, right? Otherwise, you easily go into this garbage in, garbage out process where you have foundationally not the right things in the data. So if you build on top an AI kind of generative AI bot, for example, then you're just getting nonsense anyway, right? So investing into foundations is always key, and it's always what has to come first before you actually drive any advancements in progress. And data governance really sits in the strong middle of that side. And to really make it a bit more clearer, I'm going to use an analogy, right? So I call that the soups and forks analogy, basically. So for example, let's imagine that you have a kitchen, right? And the kitchen itself is what I would call the soup infrastructure, where the soup is being made and where you can make the soup. You have cooks that are producing the soup, right? They are the ones that actually take the ingredients and make soup out of things. And you have somebody eating the soups, right? Which I would call, in that case, the soup consumers, right? If we take this analogy further, right, that means that cooks are making soup because it's the objective. So they want to make soup because that is what they basically were told to do, and this is what drives the business. But let's say the eaters actually only have forks, right? So they're getting this fluid food basically into their bowls, and all they want to do is eat something with forks. And they realize that using soup with a fork, eating soup with a fork, is just really not working. But instead of understanding why the soup is fluid and why it was served in the first place, they complain about soup quality, right? And all of a sudden, you end up with a whole soup quality management issue, saying that the soups are really bad. You cannot even eat it with forks. And this is really, I would say, an example of how data quality is oftentimes a mismatch, right, between, I would say, data production and data consumption, right? Data is being produced for a certain reason, and data should then be consumed for certain reasons, but those reasons are not always aligned, meaning that what the data is should be used for is used for other things, and that causes often a data issues, and not only data quality complaints, but also potential risks, right, where the data should have never been used for certain things out of legal reasons, right? And let's say the second part of it is that soups should not be served to everyone due to hygiene laws and security reasons, right? So let's say we have a law about this, right? So unauthorized access to soup has serious consequences too, right? And this is where regulatory and security risks come in as well, right? Which means who is to say who gets actually the soup and who doesn't get the soup? And to really have this in place is really important, and having that right management around it too, around who should get what kind of access to the soup and what they should be able to eat from the soup and what they shouldn't, is really key here. And that is, again, an analogy for data, right? A lot of data is sensitive data, we call it in data governance, like personal information, for example, or financial information that should not go to the public, right? These things need specific security aspects that should be defined basically on data governance level, and then should be enforced as well, so we don't get into legal risks or any problems as well on that side. And I think this is just an example, right, of bringing it to people. But using analogies, I feel like, is one of the things where you can explain data governance a little bit more easily, and you basically go away from a very abstract concepts of what data governance is about. So in the end, just based on example, data governance is really about people, processes, and technology, right? I know that certain tools out there have call themselves data governance tools, or they are data governance tools, or they have even data governance in their name potentially, right? But technology is always just an enabler, And you need to still have the people with the right responsibilities and decision-making bodies cross-functionally and the right processes to really make data governance work. Which is it's very important to understand that you cannot just buy data governance, right? You have to implement it, and you can maybe buy the expertise and advice and tools to make it work better, but you still need to implement it in your own organization to really make it work. And when it's about people, then you have the right organizational structure that you really need, right? With the right decision-making bodies and roles and responsibilities, such as data owners or data stewards, for example, or a data governance council. When it's about process, it's equally important to embed yourselves into existing business processes, to have certain elements within like a value stream, for example, where data governance is already being put into the process as a plugin, but also specific data governance processes themselves, such as data quality management or metadata management, right? And lastly, technology. That's about data governance being empowered specifically by technologies, but also that certain elements should be enabled through existing data platforms and systems to support that, right? So that could be, for example, a data catalog or a data quality monitoring tool, as well as having the right access controls on a data platform, for example. So some of the examples when it comes to roles is very exemplary here. Again, that needs to be adapted to whatever is working for your organization in the industry. But you usually have that space of a data governance office, of a centralized data governance team that basically is thinking, defining certain aspects like a data model or data lineage, for example, and understanding how data should flow and should be stored and accessed. And you also have analysts, for example, that investigate root causes of data problems or any kind of data issues, right? You also have usually some domain experts, right? I would call them the business matter experts, right? So that could be, for example, for a finance area, data owner that is really a higher level person that has accountability and decision-making authority, as well as a steward that supports that operationally, right? So that's like a single point of contact for operational data management, such as checking data quality, or looking at business rules and data quality rules, but specific for a specific business area. You also have technology experts, usually sitting within the IT department, right, where you have product and system owners, right, that really are in charge of looking into system level changes and system related requirements, as well as enterprise architects that manage the overall system landscape as well. And lastly, you have use case owners as well. So those that actually start using the data, right? And that can, in some places, be a data product owner because they are basically the ones making data available to people, but also the ones that using the data products or any data sets, the actual data consumers that want to make data informed decisions more, right? And that can be data analysts or data scientists, but could also be like high level leaders or any senior leaders that want to look at a dashboard and make better decisions, for example. But bringing them all together is really key here. And that is also reflected in a process, right? So when we talk about a data quality incident process, for example, then you have like these different stages where different people needs to be involved and they need to use certain tools to also make that happen, right? So for example, when a new data quality incident is being raised, then first it should be checked against business logic, right? Is that even a valid data quality incident? Or is that a request that doesn't even make sense? So, for example, let's say somebody is complaining that customer age should be actually below 18. But business logic is we cannot have any contracts with customers when they're not when they're underage, right? So having data of customers that are younger than 18 years old doesn't really make sense. So in that case, it's not really a data quality incident. But you would basically take that there, check for it. If it's valid, then investigate the root cause with an analyst that checks along the data lineage about what is the point of failure that might happen, right? Then you go into remediating that incident and making sure that it doesn't happen again by improving the process and the rules. And lastly, you would monitor data quality again based on the new rules and ensure that if that thing happened again, don't need to wait for someone to raise that incident, but you can actually monitor it and proactively change it to a better way. And lastly, there are like a lot of different data governance tools as well, right? So like a data catalog, that is a central tool for metadata management, for example, a data quality tool that's monitoring data quality and automating remediation processes, or a master data tool that's really helping for harmonizing and validating master data itself. And there might be additional ones too, depending on what's needed within the company, like a data modeling tool or a data stewardship tool or a data access management tool. But again, it's all about empowering what's needed on people and process level, right? But having these tools in place can definitely help you to be more efficient towards data governance efforts. All right, and just one more note. So data governance itself is really a guiding and directing function, right? And there is a slight difference between data governance and data management. As in the data management, it's more executing and then providing feedback towards data governance again. This is the Dharma framework, right, from actually the association that I mentioned before, where you have data governance really in the middle of it all, right? And that is guiding all of the other ones. And these other functions really are the, let's say, data management functions that operationally help to make data work. And those usually are decentralized and sitting all across the organization. And they don't have to be centralized either, right? So it's more about the data governance is connected with all of these functions and really making sure that this is working in the right way. All right. So then let's move on to more of the fun part, right? So I want to share some learnings about how to make data governance more human. The fun part comes from, again, the subjective way of people perceiving it as fun and something that they want to do and not something they just have to do, right? And this is what I want to talk about next. So number one learning is that the human part of data governance is the hardest. That is more of a general admission, I would say, about how data governance is just really the hardest, right? That means that people are not really resisting change, but they are resist being changed. And that is really key here because people don't like change usually, right? If you force change on them, they don't really like it. But if they see the value in the change themselves, then they actually want to do it. So the key here really is when it comes to data governance to also changing it from a forced directive that you put on people to making them active change makers through motivation, right? And once you get that done, then although the road and the journey is very difficult, the level of reward is also the highest because from individual people level, scaling it up to organization level, then is really organic. And it's not about using a business value to force everyone, but using the motivation of people basically to then individually drive it towards success. And that also leads to the second learning, which is that the value of data governance is personal and organizational. And it's really about framing the value of data governance in the right way, right? And I think there's a Venn diagram, in my point of view, between business impact and personal reward, right? And it's really about how you can frame it to the right people in the right way. So, for example, if the business impact is higher profitability, right? Then the middle ground might be that it's because of higher productivity on organization on personal level. And for somebody who's dealing with the data day to day and might spend a lot of time cleaning it, it's actually less manual efforts, right? And they finally can spend their time cleaning data less and focusing on more and more important topics where they can actually enjoy the work more. So that applies to the other elements that are listed here as well, right? So using only business impact, I think, is one thing. But if you understand what people's motivations are, and you can individually tell them the motivation of what's in it for them on personal level, then turning them into advocates for the change and for data governance can be actually much easier. Number three is about storytelling, right? So I think storytelling is one of the parts that is, of course, one of the buzzwords that's used all the time, also within data. But it's really about reducing resistance and getting the buy-in for data governance as well, right? So the why is, I would say, start with the why, then talk about the what, and then about the how. So, for example, the why should be that there should be a common ground for a purpose that is both on business impact and personal reward level, as I just mentioned before, and make sure that everybody agrees on the why at this point as well. Then there's the what. So that's ensuring that the required decisions and actions are plain in language that the audience understands, right? And be specific on requirements and the urgency. And then there's the how, right? And that is about actually developing a plan, a timeline, a deliverable, and commit to the solution, and making sure it becomes a priority for all collaborators. This kind of sequence of messaging and narrative doesn't only apply to data governance either, right? So I think for any data work, if you rather start with the why, right, as in what is the impact and why should we do data governance, then focus on what we need to establish to make data governance work and how we then implement it, is always better than starting with a how, which in a lot of cases I feel like is what people like to start with, right? So this is how we get data governance involved and how we establish it. But you first need to actually motivate people with the why and the what to actually do it in the right way. Number four, thinking big but starting small by following the pain. So I think getting started in data governance is really a challenge, right? And because it has always a big scope, it's really difficult to know where to start. But my theory is that in any organization, somebody is really frustrated with specific data issues, right? And they spend a lot of time probably dealing with that issue and creating workarounds, but they actually don't want to deal with it. And they want to get this problem solved really more sustainably. So acknowledging those data pain points and finding the right person to talk to about this is a great starting point for two reasons. One is because they actually really want to get this problem solved, so the likelihood of collaboration is much higher, and they have clear requirements knowing what the data should look like to be correct and usable, and they have a business impact properly already in place because they can tell you how much time they're investing per year to fix that issue that is should be fixed actually at the root cause. So you get that collaboration because of urgency. And lastly, you can then drive advocacy through that solution, because once you have solved that issue that has been driving this person crazy for a while, they are finally can be say, oh my God, thanks to data governance, we finally solved that problem. Please all talk to data governance. They can help you with your data issues. And you create marketing and word of mouth basically for data governance more, right? So really turn the frustrations of people about data into opportunities to apply data governance. And you get more and more a rollout of success cases for data governance, and to then actually get started in the right way. When it comes to data quality itself, I think understanding what data governance, what data quality is about is really key as well, right? So that means, for example, that you should have a transparency on the intended versus actual data usage. I already made that example with the soup and the forks, right? So intention is soup, actual is forks. So if you just produce data and somebody else is using it but don't know how to actually use it, or they have the wrong tools to do so or the wrong purpose for it, then you really have a difficulty there, right? So actually shedding transparency on it is the first step. Once people can then talk to each other and they can mention their requirements in the right way, then you can create this business stewardship through the right ownership of business rules. You can then agree on the definition of what good data quality actually means, because in the end, you need to all agree on levels of data quality to actually manage it, right? And then commit to the remediation process, because monitoring data quality is not enough. If it's monitored and flagged as a problem, then somebody still needs to deal with it, right? So committing to the remediation process is really key here as well, and another very important human side of data governance as well. Data governance is also a lot about having the right ambassadors and sponsorship, right? And that is really about through to do with the right relationships, I would say. And I think leadership sponsorship is a given, and I think everybody knows about how important that is. But it's also important to have the right peers and the collaborators to actually be advocates for you that can drive word of mouth for you, as well as having your own team that work in data governance or data management functions, being motivated through the value of data governance as well. And what helps me usually to think about how to talk to them, how to approach them, is kind of identifying and handling different personas of stakeholders, right? So, for example, you have promoters versus detractors, right? Those that are advocates already where you can easily jump into the what we need to do next in data governance rather than have to convince them, versus detractors that really are against it, and you need to find out first what is the resistance towards it and why they have it, right? And that needs a lot more convincing work. Then you also have natural believers and natural skeptics, those that generally believe in new things and want to get on with it, as well as skeptics that don't like change and always have a lot of questions first before they actually are on board. So changing your narrative to them and how to talk to them is also key, as well as having thinkers versus doers, right? So those that actually like to do more thinking and then not actually want to do anything, or those that jump into doing first and not actually critically thinking about it. And you have everyone in between as well, right? But knowing how your stakeholders are behaving and what kind of character they are along these lines can really help you to shape the narrative in the right way and to turn them into the right advocates for your data governance efforts as well. Ownership is also an important one. Data ownership is traditionally one of the biggest challenges when it comes to data governance, because data ownership doesn't sit in data governance. It actually sits in business functions, right? But for business functions, being on top of their actual day-to-day role, having another responsibility of being data owner is really not easy, right? And very often they see it as a burden and as a punishment to have to do this. So it's again about framing, right? So for example, instead of calling data ownership an additional responsibility without the reward, it's actually more about making what someone is already doing more official, right? Or it's not only about the risk of being blamed for more things that are wrong, but also the opportunity of authority over business critical matters. And whenever you can think about how to make these negative things in a more positive light and actually also show that in reality why that is the case, then data ownership and the conversation about it at least can a little bit easier. And the road to having proper data ownership is never easy, but at least starting the conversation on the right note, I think, is really important. Number 8 is about risk mitigation and risk prevention, right? And the thing about it is that everybody loves to celebrate heroes that are saving the day, but nobody really cares about people who are ensuring that the day never really needed saving in the first place. And the thing about governance is that if you're doing it effectively, you are preventing most of the issues. But because you're only preventing it, that they never happened, nobody will actually know, right? Unless you communicate it. So it's really important to also know that talking about prevention of issues when it comes to data governance is part of communication, and that everybody sees the value in it too. So perceiving and communicating issues really is important, and we should all have that more in mind when we talk about data governance as well. Um, Also, being creative in data governance, I think, is really key. And that is something that I'm trying to also do within this webinar, right? Of using different ways of communicating around it. Um, and as Picasso once said, the enemy of creativity is common sense. And it's really the right statement, because being creative, if you've never been creative or trying new things in your communication or your positioning, can feel really awkward. But in my past experiences, right, there are ways of doing it, such as doing a talk show or doing a data quiz, for example, or using a small marketing campaign to talk about data heroes and to make it more appealing to people to become data owners or data stewards is really key. And I think when you're afraid of being creative when it comes to communicating around data governance or any data work, the question you can ask yourself is, what's the worst that can happen, right? As long as you're not offensive on anyone or like stepping on anybody's toes, the worst that can happen is that people might not engage with it, but that's all. So you can just move on and try something else. And we all know that data still has that connotation to be like a dry and very analytical job. So using creativity can really leverage the element of surprise. And I think that applies very well to data governance as well. And number 10, and the last one, success is a matter of mindset, right? So in data governance, many of the milestones are very long term. So like increasing the data management maturity, or implementing finally new data governance mechanisms, or having a data quality monitoring tool going finally live can take months even until you can actually talk about that being a milestone. But in the meantime, it can be really demotivating if you don't have any feeling of achievement. So changing your mindset to see how smaller things can be a matter of success as well, like changing mindsets or official commitments by certain idea specific departments, or having improved efficiency a little bit, can really help to also stay motivated and also to communicate better around what other progress metrics or achievements are around data governance as well. And this having said, if you remember just one thing today, right? Data governance is the foundation for data quality and data trustworthiness. And we can automate it partly using the right tools, but it always starts with the human side, which is accountability and responsibility met with collaboration, communication, and creativity. Data governance is a team sport, not a competition. Always remember that it's about cross-functional collaboration about data governance and not just one team doing it all. And that is really key here. So before we now jump into a Q&A, I would say let's have a look how I applied the best way possible to make data governance more fun through a music video, governance of data. Yeah, Adele, please go ahead.
Yo, did you ever wonder what data governance is all about? Well, listen up. DATA, legacy we live by. In a world that's digital, we chose the data life. Enterprise-wise, the data flows left and right. We are the ones who keep it all in our sight. Rules, policies, principles, guidelines. Not the most sexy, but better than the stop signs. Working the segue between business and tech. 1 foot in each world, all data in check. Data quality, data quality. No day goes by without this terminology. We know end-to-end how data works best. We set up the rules and the business does the rest. Governance of data, defect terminators. Good data comes first and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. We're role models of excellence, let's govern it, let's go. Still not clear what data governance means? Here are some analogies to make you understand. If data is the force, then we're the Data Council. Using it well, that's one of our main goals. If data was a country in a world full of humans, we'd be in the embassy working on solutions. We're running marathons where the data flows, governing holistically in every column, every row. We're not the police, but we are data Sherpas. With our help, there's no hurdle that you can't pass. We might be nerds, but just the good kind. We can do great things even more than these rhymes. Governance of data, governance of defect terminators. Defect terminators. Good data comes first, and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. Make it flow. We're role models of excellence. Let's go. Let's go. You made it here. This is the third verse. Are you ready for some governance buzzwords? People, process, projects, and tools. Automation starts with business rules. Data models, solution designs. A data catalog helps us to simplify. Master, reference, and metadata. Overviews are good, but governance is greater. System updates and new integrations will design solutions with standing ovations. Governance is cool, you got that right. In the name of data, hands up and high five. Governance of data. Governance of data. Defect terminator. Good data comes first, and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. We're role models of excellence. Let's govern it, let's go. Governance of data. Defect terminator. Good data comes first, and the rest will follow later. We know what is right, so let's make the data flow. We're role models of excellence. Let's govern it, let's go.
That was awesome. As I said,
Thank
everyone,
you.
the Bo Burnham of data. I'm just gonna share some of the comments that we're getting. So one, couldn't agree more. Let's get Tiankai's songs to be on everyone's 2024 Spotify Wrapped list by end of the year. I
Wow.
couldn't agree more. Let's definitely, it's definitely on my Spotify. Highly recommend that you check out Tiankai's YouTube channel as well. It has a lot more songs as well. We'll be sharing the link in the chat. I'm gonna share a bit more comments here. You know, go data by Jeshma. Couldn't agree more. Maya, this is awesome. Yes, indeed, this is definitely awesome. Richie here, sing along for the chorus. Governors of data, defect terminators. Yeah, I can agree. Leonardo, defect terminators. Yes, I agree. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, Jane here. Where can I find the link to the song? Love it. I want to share it with my colleagues. Yeah, we're gonna share it here. Um, and yeah, Joshua, another one. This rock's great day to make a learning stick. Mind blown. Yes, yes, yes. We're gonna start doing
Nice.
sing along, code alongs. Okay, okay. Key change here. Yeah, but everyone, I just want to make sure do ask your questions to Tiankai here because we have quite a bit of time. We have 15 minutes. I have a few questions here, and yeah, I need to improve my vocals as well. I cannot compete with this
No pressure. No pressure.
at all. I know a bit of guitar, but that's about it. But yeah, not my forte singing. That is. Yeah, so I'm gonna start off maybe with the first question from Danny. It's a bit of a general question I think touched upon. How can you make how can you convince stakeholders, that data governance should be a priority within the organization?
Yeah. I mean, there are usually two key triggers for data governance to suddenly become a topic. One is regulations, right? So if you're in
Mm-hmm.
a heavily regulated industry, like in healthcare, for example, or in finances, financial services, right, then you have a lot of regulations in place on global and local level.
Mm-hmm.
So, complying with regulations means, by definition, often you have to have the right people with the right accountabilities, like a data security officer or a data protection officer or a CFO, maybe, right, who need to be responsible for things. And to really bring data governance in, usually starts with, okay, how do we comply with regulations?
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring data governance in, and then we have the right tools and the right people and the right process in place to deal with it. The other side is if data quality arises as an overall challenge for the overall organization, and it just becomes so big that nobody knows how to manage data quality anymore, and everybody's just busy fixing data and not being able to use it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually, especially in, like, let's say, for example, consumer facing companies where a lot of the data is being seen by consumers. If they don't have data governance in place, then it can easily get very frustrating for consumers as well, right? So data quality, data regulations, those I would say would be the two things to get it onto the radar of leaders, and to
Mm-hmm.
then say data governance is the answer to those, and we need to have it in place. That would be the key to prioritize it.
Okay, that's really great. Another question here from Leonardo. I think that's a really close one. How do you convince people about data governance as not being a cost but an investment? I think this kind of covers it. But he also adds another question. Are there any stats that show if you invest $1 in a data governance program, how much it saves the business? What's the ROI of a data governance program, essentially?
Yeah, that there unfortunately there's no generic answer to this. I think Gartner had made a research how much data quality issues are costing. I think they said something about $5 billion per year
Mm-hmm.
that are basically over the world are being wasted because of data quality issues. So that is a close one. But to be really specific, it really depends on your business again, right? So let's say, for example, we take the data quality and data regulations example, right? If you think about the fines specific to not complying with regulations, those are the things you are saving, so to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm complying, so I'm saving the cost of being fined by the government. Or data quality means you are investing like so many person hours or person days per year on fixing data manually instead of fixing it properly. That you can calculate into money as well, right? And that is how much
Mm-hmm.
you would save it. But in the end, it always feels like an investment first because you need to build the foundations, and then use case by use case, you are saving the business more and more, but you're investing less and less, right? Because then you have a scalable process, and in the end, like the curve just goes into more and more basically saving and business impact compared to less and less investment. So that would be over time the long-term trend of data governance.
Yeah, we also received another question here from Maya on the ROI concept. Maybe I'll add one additional thing here as well, because there's a very similar ROI dynamic to data literacy investments, for example, or data fluency investments, right? Which is also there's another ROI to think about here. Is something Valerie Logan taught me, which is risk of ignoring. There is a big risk of ignoring here. And that can have massive costs, as Tiankai has mentioned, right? So, as a kind of a maybe a narrative trick to use here. Another question here from Jacob. Any suggestions on how can this type of framework be implemented in an organization without the resources for a centralized data governance office or dedicated data governance roles?
Uh, that's a great question. I would say dedication is a must. You cannot not have dedicate, but you don't have to call it maybe like you don't have to maybe give those people specific the names, and you don't have to start with the organizational structure with the role names that I've mentioned before, right? So if you want to just really get started, actually, you might just do it with specific people that have the right knowledge and the right motivation to do so, and to apply data governance on one of the use cases, right? It might be a small pilot or something, like one data quality issue on a specific attribute that a specific business department is using, and then trying to apply the basically people process tools things that I just mentioned, but doing it basically with an existing amount of people that just
Mm-hmm.
are willing to drive a change. And over time, you cannot afford not to have dedication though anymore, right? So data governance needs to have dedication, especially within the data governance, the business teams to really drive this, such as data ownership and data stewardship. Otherwise, you will never be able to actually steer it in the right way. But getting started to actually get the buy-in and showing value of
Mm-hmm.
it, just do it without calling a data governance, but apply the principles. And once you have the value based on that use case, then you can roll it out with more dedication.
Okay, that's great. Another question as well here from LinkedIn user. From LinkedIn users asking, what's a popular framework organizations prefer to implement for data governance?
Yeah. So there's the Dharma data management framework. That is something that I think is a very established standard. They have a whole book on it called the DEMBOK, the Data Management Body of Knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also get certified in it, called the CDMP exam. That's something you can check out. Also, there's the DGI, the Data Governance Institute. They have a framework
Mm-hmm.
as well that you can check out. And lastly, one thing that, especially for those that want to get started, there's a great framework from Bob Zeiner called non-invasive data governance. And he basically says that instead of disrupting the business, we can build on the existing business processes and bring data governance that way. That's something you should definitely check out as well. That's a book, and he also has some trainings about that as well.
Yeah, it's really connected to this second question that we're going to ask. Are you familiar with the non-invasive data governance framework? If so, how does your approach compare? Key differences, similarities to that one? Maybe expand on the non-invasive data governance framework.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, non-invasive data governance really, as I mentioned, right, is about leveraging what is already in your organization, like business processes and people that are familiar with data and work with data, and that
Mm-hmm.
are efficient, basically affectionate about data, and to really make their roles and the processes more official to drive them towards data governance. I think what I'm talking about is just building actually a lot on non-invasive data governance. I'm just going deeper on the people aspect, I would say more,
Mm-hmm.
and have a bit more practical learnings about that as well. But I'm a big ambassador of the non-invasive data governance as well, and that's something I would always suggest as well to do, and never go for like a big bang disruptive approach.
Yeah. One question as well from Danny here. Follow-up question: how long can an implementation take for introducing and implementing data governance, which I think is forever?
That's a great question. So first of all,
Yeah.
data governance is never finished, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's really not an end to it. But getting started and showing value can be challenging, which is why I'm saying, right, try it on one use case first, and don't try to boil the ocean. It's really
Mm-hmm.
important to show value of data governance to as be established and then be a reason to actually continue doing it. So going
Mm-hmm.
use case by use case instead of saying we're not going to do data governance on everything all at once, I think is really a smarter move. And you can then also, the good thing is you can choose your use cases by the speed of implementation as well. And if you need to be faster, then choose a simple one, right? And don't be like too complicated, and only do it when there's like more business priority behind complicated use cases.
Okay, that's great. One question here, but a very important one. How do you include data scientists, data analysts at the beginning of a data governance conversation program? I feel like most of the time we're at the end of the data flow where we deal with whatever data we receive. And this touches upon a very, very important concept that we're going to cover quite extensively in the future, which is shifting left and building effective data, managing data like a product, right?
Absolutely.
So maybe Tiankai expand on how we can solve for this. and
Absolutely.
how to best approach this.
Yes. I think, in a nutshell, my answer is, if you can be really, the best way you can help with data governance is be really clear and very vocal about your requirements towards data, because that
Hmm.
is something that often is missing in data governance, where receiving more generic data complaints is not really helping. You still don't know what actually needs to be done, right? So if you can basically formulate your data requirements on attribute level with very specific statements, as in this attribute should be in a certain granularity, or I need that data in a certain timeliness on a daily basis. If you write that down and have clear requirements, then that's really great, because that is something that data governance can immediately work with. And the second point is, if you can already also estimate the business impact of your work, as in that with your data science work, you're helping with decisions that are worth like 1 million euros or $1 million per year, then this is something that really helps prioritizing as well. And the more you can actually shape the business impact and talk about it, the better data governance can actually prioritize it as well. So I think those two things are the best way to help.
Yeah, that's definitely a great way to start. And yeah, definitely tune in for our upcoming content. We have a really interesting podcast on this exact topic with Saurabh Gupta, who's also at ThoughtWorks on the data strategy and data governance team, on the concept of shifting left and how to best approach getting the data team early in the data governance conversation, data quality conversation. So yeah, that will be released, I think, at the end of the month. So do check it out. We do have 4 minutes left, so I don't see any additional questions. Do ask us questions if you still have any questions. We'll make sure to reply to you either on LinkedIn or via email. You can reach out to us at any point in time. With that in mind, I just wanted to say a huge thank you not only for Tiankai but for everyone who attended today's webinar. Different time zones, different countries, all over the world. I've seen more than 300 people attend today's webinar, which is awesome to see. I want to say to Tiankai, thank you so much for the awesome presentation and for the great song. It was so fun listening to it. Everyone, make sure to save it on your YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your music. And let's make sure that we all see it on our Spotify route by the end of the year. Tiankai, it was so great having you on.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.